Welcome to True Crime, the Untold Stories, where we investigate a startling story of betrayal, power, and tragedy. A sheriff's affair with a teenager leads to pregnancy, setting off a chain of events that culminates in a ghastly murder. Join us as we uncover the alarming details of this perplexing case and explore how an improper relationship spiraled into deadly violence. Sheriff Morris "Biggie" Biggs was a respected figure in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. At 47, he had spent over 2 decades in law enforcement and was admired for his strong leadership and magnetic personality. But behind his badge, Morris harbored a darker side. For several months, he had been having an affair with 19-year-old Rosie Rosenfeld, a local waitress. To the public, Morris presented himself as a devoted husband to his wife of 21 years, Ellie Mae Biggs. But the truth was far more complicated. Ellie May, a well-regarded school librarian, had long suspected her husband's infidelity. Although she kept a calm and composed exterior, rumors of Morris's behavior gnawed at her. For years, she chose to stay in the marriage for their children's sake and to maintain appearances within their close-knit community. However, Morris's controlling and abusive nature strained their relationship, leaving Ellie May feeling both trapped and resentful. Rosie, on the other hand, was timid and impressionable, easily swayed by Morris's promises of financial security and a better life. She recently graduated from high school and had hopes of attending college, but those dreams began to slip away as her relationship with Malcolm grew more serious. Though she tried to remain hopeful, she became increasingly anxious, especially as Morris distanced her from friends and family. When Rosie discovered she was pregnant, everything changed. She felt trapped and powerless in a situation beyond her control. Morris's initial reaction was fury, quickly replaced by a cold indifference. While he had charmed her early on, he had no interest in fathering another child, especially one that could jeopardize his reputation. This complicated love triangle stirred intense emotions in everyone involved. Rosie, now carrying a child, was scared and uncertain of her future, while Morris felt the burden of his choices and the looming risk of public scandal. For Ellie May, news of the affair and the pregnancy was shattering. She had endured years of Morris's controlling behavior, but the thought of him fathering a child with someone younger than their son Matthew was too much to bear. In the days leading up to his death, Morris's once powerful facade began to crack. The mounting pressure of the situation was palpable, and each person in this twisted love triangle sensed that something had to give. On the morning of July 9, 2010, Sheriff Morris "Biggie" Biggs was found dead in his home. Around 8 a.m., his longtime neighbor, Wyatt Ragsdale, a retired school principal, went outside to fetch his morning paper when he noticed Morris's garage door was open. Wyatt, accustomed to chatting with Morris whenever he could, decided to check on him since Morris's car was still in the garage. As he stepped inside, Wyatt called out Morris's name, but there was no reply. Moving further in, Wyatt immediately sensed that something was wrong. Morris's lifeless body lay sprawled on the floor in a pool of blood, shot multiple times, with blood spatter covered the walls. The grisly scene was beyond anything Wyatt had ever encountered. Shaking, Wyatt backed out of the garage and dialed 911. "There's been a murder," he told the dispatcher. Within minutes, emergency responders were on their way. When the police arrived, they found Wyatt outside, visibly shaken. He recounted what he had seen, and officers entered the garage to investigate. They later described the crime scene as chaotic and violent, clearly the result of a confrontation. Morris had been shot multiple times, in the head, chest, and even the genital area, suggesting a brutal personal attack. His service revolver, the murder weapon, lay on the floor nearby. The main interior of the house showed further signs of struggle, shattered glass and overturned furniture, but nothing had been stolen, leading investigators to rule out robbery as a motive. Detective Millicent Goodwin immediately called in a full forensics team, officially launching the investigation into Sheriff Biggs's murder. The small town of Pine Bluff was about to discover that their beloved sheriff had been hiding far more than anyone could have imagined. The police arrived at Morris Biggs's house within minutes of Wyatt Ragsdale's 911 call on July 9, 2010. Detective Millicent Goodwin, a 20-year veteran of the Pine Bluff Police Department known for her no-nonsense approach, led the investigation. She began assessing the chaotic crime scene. Morris's lifeless body lay sprawled on the garage floor in a pool of blood. Morris had been shot 3 times, once in the head, once in the chest, and once in the genital area. While the head and chest wounds were consistent with a calculated murder, the injury to the genitals was striking. Detective Goodwin and her team theorized that this shot was intentional, possibly a mark of anger or revenge, indicating a deeply personal motive. It wasn't just about killing him, Goodwin would later reflect. This was about sending a message. The use of Morris's own service revolver suggested that the attacker knew his habits and routines well. Forensics teams arrived to thoroughly examine the scene for clues. They carefully documented the blood spatter across the garage walls and collected evidence from the shattered vase and overturned furniture. With no signs of forced entry, investigators theorized that Morris likely knew his attacker and had let them in willingly. This detail, combined with the deliberate gunshot wound to his genitals, suggested the crime was fueled by intense emotions, perhaps rage, jealousy, or betrayal. By late afternoon, police had outlined a rough timeline. Morris had likely been attacked late the previous night or in the early hours of the morning. The nature of his wounds, the lack of missing items, and the chaotic state of the house confirmed that this wasn't a botched robbery, but a targeted killing. The wound to his genitals hinted at personal motives behind the attack. Detective Goodwin and her team now shifted their focus to those who might have a reason to want Morris dead. As they continued gathering evidence, they prepared to question those closest to him, knowing that in a town as small as Pine Bluff, dark secrets wouldn't stay hidden for long. Ellie Mae Biggs, Morris's wife of 21 years, was among the first people police interviewed. When she sat down with Detective Millicent Goodwin on the evening of July 9, 2010, her demeanor was calm, yet her words revealed a history of unhappiness and betrayal. Ellie May admitted that her marriage had been troubled for a long time. She confessed to having suspected Morris of infidelity for years. "I just knew," she told Detective Goodwin. "There were too many signs." She recounted finding small clues in their shared minivan, stray hair clips, and unfamiliar scents of perfumes. Then, her suspicions were fully confirmed with items she couldn't ignore: a thong under the passenger seat and used condoms stashed in the glove compartment. Each discovery solidified her fears. Morris was cheating. The most devastating confirmation, however, came about 5 months before Morris's death. One afternoon, Ellie May returned home early from her job as a school librarian, only to find her husband, Morris, in bed with 19-year-old Rosie Rosenfeld, a waitress from a local diner. "I couldn't believe it," she recalled. "I just stood there, frozen. My husband, with a naked girl young enough to be his daughter, having sex in our bed. The betrayal was overwhelming." Ellie May decided to confront Morris one night while their 2 children were away on a school trip. However, he brushed her off, insisting that what she had seen wasn't a big deal. He said it was just sex, that these young women were the ones offering themselves to him, and that he couldn't say no, that it didn't mean anything. Ellie May recounted, her voice shaking. "But it meant everything to me." As if the affair wasn't enough, Ellie May soon discovered that Rosie was pregnant with Morris's child. Late one night, she overheard Morris on the phone with Rosie, discussing the pregnancy. She couldn't believe it. Her husband was not only having an affair, but was about to have a child with someone else. After putting up with so much for so long, this was simply too much for Ellie May. The revelation of the affair, followed by the news of Rosie's pregnancy, drove Ellie May to her emotional breaking point. She felt humiliated, furious, and utterly betrayed by the man she had once loved. She told the police she just wanted it all to be over, her marriage, and the pain it had caused. Despite her painful admissions, Ellie May remained calm during the questioning. She denied any involvement in Morris's murder, insisting that, while she hated what he had done, she hadn't killed him. Still, the police saw her as a key suspect, and her motive, years of betrayal and anger, was unmistakable. Rosie Rosenfeld, the 19-year-old waitress at the local diner, had been drawn into a complex, manipulative relationship with Sheriff Morris Biggs. When questioned by police, Rosie described how Morris had promised her a future far beyond her current life. Growing up in a small town as the daughter of a convicted felon, Rosie had big dreams but little means to achieve them. She had dropped out of school and worked late shifts at the diner, living paycheck to paycheck. Then Morris entered her life, and everything seemed to change. Rosie told the police that Morris promised her a world of possibilities, assuring her he could provide financial security and give her everything she'd ever wanted. Nearly 30 years her senior, Morris convinced her he'd buy her a house, support her, and even take her on vacations. He once described a trip he planned for them to Six Flags over Texas and Arlington, a dream for Rosie, who had never left Arkansas. These promises made her feel she finally had a future to look forward to. But things shifted when Rosie found out she was pregnant. In early May 2009, after weeks of feeling nauseous and fatigued, she took a pregnancy test. The result was positive, leaving her stunned and uncertain. "I didn't know what to do," she admitted to the police. "I felt trapped." The pregnancy left Rosie feeling conflicted. On one hand, she hoped Morris would keep his promise of financial security and care for her and the baby. On the other, she feared he'd abandon her, sensing his promises might have been empty all along. She began to feel isolated, unsure of where to turn. Her situation took a frightening turn when Ellie Mae Biggs, Morris's wife, confronted her. Rosie recounted the terrifying afternoon when Ellie May showed up at her apartment with a big knife, having just discovered the pregnancy. "She knew everything and said she'd cut my baby into little pieces," Rosie recalled. Ellie May accused her of wrecking her marriage and demanded to know if the pregnancy was real. Rosie, trembling with fear, admitted it. "I was afraid," she told investigators. Ellie May was fuming with anger, and I didn't know what she was going to do. Overwhelmed with guilt and shame, Rosie felt trapped in a love triangle spiraling out of control. She told police that, while she wanted to escape the situation, she had no intention for it to turn violent. Her vulnerability and fear made her a person of interest, but she insisted she lacked the anger or strength to kill Morris. Yet her affair and pregnancy entangled her deeply in the case, and investigators saw her as a central figure in uncovering the truth. The investigation took a dramatic turn when police dug deeper into Morris Biggs's affair with Rosie Rosenfeld. During an intense interrogation, Rosie broke down, revealing disturbing details of how Morris had manipulated her for months. Officers were stunned as she described the emotional stranglehold he'd placed on her life. It wasn't just the promise of a house or a trip to Six Flags that kept her under his control. Morris had gone much further. Rosie explained that her mother, a convicted felon with a history of drug offenses, was currently serving time. Morris, leveraging his power as sheriff, had threatened that if she ever left him or disclosed her pregnancy, he would use his influence to have guards punish her mother in prison. The fear and pressure were overwhelming, leaving Rosie feeling completely trapped. As the officers listened, they began to understand the gravity of Morris's manipulation. This wasn't just an affair gone wrong. It was a stark abuse of power that left Rosie feeling terrified and cornered. Detective Goodwin and her team were disturbed and angry at Morris's exploitation. But Rosie's story had another twist. She revealed that she had once dated Morris's son, Matthew Biggs, before becoming involved with the sheriff. She and Matthew had broken up just months before her affair with Morris began, but Matthew had no idea that his father was now her lover. This prior relationship added new layers to the case. Though Matthew, estranged from his father for years, had confronted Morris about the affair, he was unaware of the pregnancy. This new information reshaped the investigation, opening up complex motives and dynamics among those involved. Detectives began to question whether Matthew could have played a role in the murder or if Rosie had acted under the weight of Morris's threats. The tangled relationships and manipulation within the Biggs family left investigators piecing together a case that was darker and more complex than they had ever anticipated. Matthew "Matty" Biggs, 21, had long been known as a wild card in Pine Bluff. He had a reputation for being quick-tempered and promiscuous, with his relationship often fueled by turbulence. His relationship with Rosie Rosenfeld was no exception, She eventually broke up with him after discovering he was repeatedly unfaithful. Friends of Rosie recalled how deeply hurt she was by his betrayals, with the final straw coming when she found out he had been having sex with multiple women behind her back. Adding to his notoriety was Matthew's violent reputation. Though he came off as quiet around strangers, he had a darker side that often emerged in his relationships. During questioning, Rosie revealed a disturbing detail to the police. Matthew had physically abused her on several occasions. Tearfully, she disclosed that she had been pregnant with Matthew's child before their breakup, but had miscarried multiple times as a result of his beatings. This revelation shocked investigators, adding another layer of tragedy to Rosie's story. When Matthew discovered that Rosie was now pregnant with his father's child, his rage reportedly intensified. To him, this wasn't just a betrayal by Rosie, but by his own father. Friends said Matthew was overcome with humiliation and a deep sense of betrayal. Morris had not only taken his girlfriend, but had also gotten her pregnant. A friend recalled him as devastated and unhinged after hearing the news, describing how he stormed out of a nearby bar upon catching wind of the pregnancy rumor, visibly shaken and muttering about handling it. During his interrogation, Matthew's anger was unmistakable. The police characterized him as unpredictable, with difficulty managing his emotions. Despite his denial of any role in his father's murder, his animosity toward Morris and Rosie was evident. Officers later noted that his anger was impossible to overlook, though no direct evidence tied him to the crime. Matthew's potential motive for murder was clear. His father's betrayal and Rosie's pregnancy served as painful reminders of his humiliation and anger. Yet, despite his violent past and history with Rosie, Matthew continued to insist he had no role in the crime. On the night of July 8, 2010, Ellie Mae Biggs reached her breaking point. After years of betrayal, suspicion, and humiliation, she could no longer endure Morris's lies and manipulation. The discovery of his affair with Rosie Rosenfeld and Rosie's pregnancy pushed her over the edge. For months, Ellie Mae had harbored quiet, simmering anger, feeling trapped in a marriage to a man she once loved but now despised. That night, while their two children were away on a school trip, Ellie May confronted Morris. What began as a familiar argument quickly intensified, but this time, Ellie May had a plan. As always, Morris dismissed her suspicions as mere paranoia before retreating to the garage, likely to spend the night with one of his girlfriends. Determined, Ellie May went to the closet and retrieved his gun. With her hands shaking and her heart pounding, she pointed the weapon at him. In a moment of cold fury, she pulled the trigger, hitting Morris in the groin. Police would later interpret the shot as symbolic, a response to Morris's betrayal. As Morris collapsed to the floor, bleeding heavily, Ellie May stood over him, overwhelmed by a tumultuous mix of relief, guilt, anger, and fear. She felt justified in her actions, convinced Morris had brought this on himself. But as she watched him lying there, a chilling realization set in. What had she done? In a frantic attempt to stage the scene as a robbery, Ellie May scattered furniture and broke objects around the room. However, when detectives arrived, they quickly saw through the inconsistencies in her story, and forensic evidence pointed to her as the primary suspect. The gun was registered to Morris, and there were no signs of forced entry. During interrogation, Ellie May finally broke down and confessed. The gravity of her actions hit her as officers handcuffed her, and she was left with a grim sense of resignation and regret. She had hoped that ending Morris's life would bring her peace, but instead, she felt only sorrow and the cold reality of a life behind bars. In March 2011, Ellie Mae Biggs went to trial for the murder of her husband, Sheriff Morris Biggs, in a case that drew widespread media coverage and filled the Pine Bluff, Arkansas courtroom with family, friends, and community members. Ellie Mae's defense attorney, Susan Bailey, argued that years of emotional abuse and betrayal by Morris had driven her to the breaking point. The defense relied on what they called cheated wife defense, presenting Ellie May as a victim of her husband's repeated infidelities. Bailey introduced evidence of Morris's long-standing affair with 19-year-old Rosie Rosenfeld. Witnesses testified that Ellie May had discovered disturbing signs of her husband's unfaithfulness, including used condoms and women's underwear, left in their family minivan. Through these revelations, Bailey portrayed Ellie May as a woman pushed beyond her limits by her husband's callousness, leading to the tragic confrontation. District Attorney Wilma Tillman offered a contrasting perspective, contending that Ellie May had acted with premeditation. Tillman argued that she had confronted Morris about his affairs multiple times and knew exactly what she was doing when she shot him. Tillman painted a vivid picture of the crime scene, highlighting the brutality of the murder and the emotional toll it had taken on the community. Throughout the trial, Ellie May's family sat in the courtroom daily, hoping for a favorable outcome. While Ellie May appeared calm, she grappled with the anxiety of a possible long prison sentence. Community sentiment was divided. Some sympathized with her, while others viewed her as a murderer. After several days of testimony, the jury reached a verdict on March 30, 2011. Ellie May was found guilty of second-degree murder. The news struck her hard. She had hoped that her circumstances would lead to a lighter sentence, but instead she faced a lengthy prison term. The judge sentenced her to 25 years, and Ellie May broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the prospect of years separated from her children. The verdict sent shockwaves through the Biggs family, respected for years in Pine Bluff. Friends and family felt a mix of relief and sorrow, struggling to reconcile their memories of Ellie May with her actions. Her trial and sentencing left a profound impact on all involved, underscoring the tragic consequences of infidelity and emotional abuse. After Ellie Mae Biggs was sentenced to 25 years for the murder of her husband, Sheriff Morris Biggs, the lives of those involved changed dramatically. Ellie May was sent to the Arkansas Correctional Institute for Women in Newport, where she faced a harsh reality. Most of her days were spent in solitude, reflecting on the choices that had led her to such a tragic act. The guilt weighed heavily on her, knowing her actions had shattered her family and brought pain to the Pine Bluff community. Her children, left to navigate life without their mother's presence, were a constant concern for Ellie May as she struggled to find meaning behind bars. The aftermath of the trial also brought unexpected changes for Rosie Rosenfeld and Matthew Biggs, Morris's son. Following the trial, Matthew reached out to Rosie. Their history was complicated. They had dated before her affair with his father. Though known for his own troubled past, Matthew had held on to strong feelings for Rosie, even after everything that had happened. Both shared a desire to move beyond the chaos of their lives, finding common ground in their shared experiences. In June 2011, only a few months after the trial, Matthew and Rosie rekindled their relationship, meeting regularly at local coffee shops and parks around Pine Bluff. Slowly, they found comfort in one another. Known in the past for his violent tendencies, Matthew showed signs of change, dedicating himself to his personal growth. He began attending therapy, working on his anger issues, and striving to be a supportive partner to Rosie and a father figure to baby boy born early that year. By the summer of 2012, the couple decided to deepen their commitment. They announced their engagement at a small family gathering, surprising those around them. Later that year, they married in a modest ceremony at a local park, surrounded by close friends and family. For Matthew and Rosie, it marked a fresh start, a chance to build a life free from the shadows of their past. Meanwhile, Ellie May's prison experience became a journey of self-reflection and redemption. She participated in therapy programs and worked to reconnect with her children through regular visits. Though her actions had led to profound consequences, Ellie May hoped that one day she could earn their trust and rejoin their lives. The intertwined fates of Ellie May, Rosie, and Matthew highlighted the complexities of love, betrayal, and the aftermath of tragic choices. Each struggled to rebuild in the wake of a tragedy that had left lasting scars on everyone involved. Morris Biggs' story remains a sobering reminder of the destructive potential of power of betrayal and the devastating impact it can have on all of those connected. This is True Crime, the Untold Stories. Hey, interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like our content and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories. Do you have any thoughts about this case, or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe.